Hello, and welcome to this video, which has been developed to support people who are working through their qualification in leadership management or coaching with the CMI, but it's also hopefully a useful standalone little video as well for anybody who's interested in reflective practice. So over the next 10 minutes, I will be introducing the concept of reflective practice, benefits, and some tools to support a reflective practice process. My name is Alex Furman. I'm one of the tutors for Promethean Executive. And if anybody has any questions about this video, then please feel free to reach out and contact me. So why be a reflective practitioner? What are the benefits of reflective practice? And I've chosen for this a nice little summary provided by Kathy Wagner, or Wagner, probably Wagner, from 2006. And so Kathy Wagner was an education professional and became a reflective practitioner while she was going through her training. And she talks really about the benefits that it brought to her, her practice in professional practice as an educational administrator. So a few little quotes that I rather liked. Self-reflective practice enabled me to identify the exemplars of my practice and plan the next steps in my professional development. I became a confident practitioner, able to ponder and adjust my practice to better meet the diverse learning needs of my students. As I began my third year as an administrator, I realised that I felt different from the previous 2 years. I noticed that I now work with more confidence and I have a vision, a new direction for the work that I do. So I suppose a couple of things which jump to mind is that this isn't a quick fix. It's not a hack, essentially, uh, that will lead to transformational results straight away. So it takes time. And so she's talking about this 3 year journey really, and that sounds about right. So it may well take a bit of time for the really tangible benefits of it of investing in reflective practice to really start to manifest. Um, The other thing, I think, is that her experience doesn't relate to just doing the same thing. Reflective practice here for her was a catalyst for change. So vision, new direction for the work I do. So reflective practice hasn't led to stability and doing the same thing over and over again. It's led to changes in practice and hopefully with that improvements in practice as well. So reflective practice, I guess you could say, is a catalyst for change. So just some thoughts then in terms of best practice or good practice in reflective practice. What considerations might we sort of think about or work with? So the first one, reflective practice should be supported by data and evidence. So and that can take many different forms, but having an empirical basis for reflective practice. So whether it's about actually speaking to people, gathering feedback from people, 360 feedback maybe, on how you're doing, being I suppose curious about other people's perspectives, so that you're not just basing it on your own self-appraisal, because many of us will give ourselves an overly hard time, and we have that sort of bias towards the negative, and sometimes how we appraise ourselves it can be quite skewed towards that. You can so from my point of view, you could run a fabulous training session, but there's one little bit that didn't go to plan or didn't go quite right. That's the bit that we will dwell on and perhaps overthink. So making sure that our evidence basis is rounded and balanced and supported really from any available data or evidence. Talking to people who will give us an honest but balanced appraisal gives us good data rather than just playing it through in our own minds, which is likely to be again skewed or perhaps really quite significantly incorrect actually, particularly if we really do over reflect on the negative rather than seeing our performance or our work in the round. So just going back to the quotes from before, it should relate to planning and action. So it's not a process that just exists within its own bubble. Reflective practice should then lead to action plans and to change, and to an evolution or a development of what we've done in the past. So if all we're doing is essentially repeating the same thing over and over again, we're probably not getting the best out of the reflective practice process. So just to reaffirm that, really, reflective practice should lead to the development of new goals and experiments. It should drive innovation, change, and yeah, experimentation with the new, rather than just be self-perpetuating, you know. Um, and a few things to kind of think about here, really, and one I think is just to make sure that actually that reflective practice, rather than happening in isolation, it leads to and is supported by really quite thorough personal and professional development plans that will target us and focus towards positive action. We're reflecting, we're learning from our experiences, but then we need to be evolving as well, rather than just going round and round in the same old loops. David Kolb, the author behind the concept of experiential learning, I mean, one of the authors, I suppose you'd say, one of the more well-known authors behind experiential learning, talks about 3 levels of learning. So the first is where we repeat the same experience every single time. There might be some learning from that when you're sort of a little bit on autopilot and we're acting without any reflection at all. It's highly likely that we will do the same thing over and over again. So this is really the absence of reflection and the absence of learning from experience means that it's unlikely to change. It might change a little bit, but more perhaps because of contextual factors or by accident, rather than through deliberate action to improve or change it in some positive way. So that's the first level of learning. The second level of learning is where we have an experience and then we review it, and we think about it and we reflect on it, and then we improve that experience next time around. So I suppose I could say that, if I'm running a training session on, say, I don't know, coaching skills or something like that, and I review that training session, that workshop. Say I run a 2-hour workshop on coaching skills, and I can reflect on that workshop, and I could perhaps think, well, I could do that a little bit different. That was good. I'll leave that alone. That could have been a little bit better. Maybe I should have asked more questions and talked a bit less. That sort of thing. Next time I go around, and I'm running a 2-hour workshop on coaching skills, I would make those changes and I would hopefully run a better workshop. So that's level 2 learning. It's about improving a specific experience. The third level of learning is really quite transformational. And that's where we review the experience, but then we generalize and we think about, well, in terms of those lessons learned, the through reflective practice, the learning points that we've identified, where else could they apply? How could they apply beyond the specific experience? And so I suppose if I go back to my previous example, if I have reviewed my session on coaching skills, one of the points I've drawn out of it is that I could have spoken a bit less, asked more questions to improve audience participation. Actually, if I was to take that point and apply it to every session that I teach, then actually I'm starting to really move the dial, in a variety and bring it in my whole professional life. And then I could perhaps take that idea home and think about, well, how could I use that when I'm helping the children to do their homework and that sort of thing. And so that learning point can become very significant if we generalize it across many different domains and areas of our work. So here we go. Reflective practice cycle, the experiential learning cycle provided by David Kolb, I suppose, supports that. So just to break it down, we begin by identifying the experience that we want to reflect on. It's likely to be something that's significant to us, that's key to what we do, and it's something that we would like to improve. So we identify the experience. Reflective observation, perhaps with a bit of structure, although not always, but perhaps with a bit of structure, we look at what we got right, the strengths and the weaknesses of what we did, of our performance, of that experience, how we engaged with it, what went well, what didn't go so well, the good and the bad, perhaps. So reflection. And then we move to abstract conceptualization. Well, that's where we pull out our learning points, our sort of our observations from our reflection, the points that we thought went well, the points that we perhaps would do differently next time, and we generalize. This is all about generalization. So where else could it apply? How could we apply these learning points further beyond the specific experience that we've had? And then active experimentation, planning, the action plan, that this is our call to action, the changes that we're going to make, the objectives that we're going to, the new goals or objectives that we're going to pursue based on our reflection. And then we are back into concrete experience, but hopefully with the benefit of learning, which, you know, if we've gone through this structured process, we should have identified learning points, which will mean that the next time we go round, we get better results, we improve. So that's really what we would hope to see: change, improvement, evolution in whatever it is that we're doing, how we're working. Another little model to support personal reflection is the SWOT analysis. And this one, I suppose, is a tried and tested model that can be used in lots of different ways. But I suppose in this context, I suppose I would think about maybe undertaking a SWOT analysis on yourself. And if you think about yourself, say, as a coach or as a leader, depending on whichever learning journey you're on at the moment, how would you define your strengths? What do you believe your strengths in your practice are? Do you have any weaknesses in your practice? What are they? And again, actually supporting that with some evidence, again, be it 360 feedback, speaking to clients or colleagues and asking for their point of view on this would be really good, because again, what we can do is perhaps veer towards the weaknesses a little bit too much. We, human beings, we have that sensitivity to the negative. So supporting this with some data would help us, I think, to be quite balanced when we're looking at our strengths and weaknesses. And then in terms of the context that we're operating in, what are our opportunities for improvement? And are there any threats? What are the things that could hold us back or stop us from improving? And one of the big ones, which often comes up when I talk about reflective practice, is time, operational pressures, and those sorts of things, which might make deliberate reflection and improvement, and change more difficult, because we're sort of in a bit more of a firefighting place. So that's the type of thing that we might identify in threats. So very good tool, tried and tested, and again, it's used a lot in terms of reviewing, say, the performance of a project or a product and that sort of thing. But in this context, perhaps you could think about your own SWOT analysis. So for you, in terms of your professional life, a really honest and evidence-based, evidence-informed SWOT analysis on where you are now would be a very interesting thing to do, and provide a really good basis for actions. How do we build on our strengths? How do we overcome our weaknesses? How do we grasp opportunities? And how do we manage or avoid the threats that we might identify? Slightly more positive language is the SWOT analysis. So this relates to, I guess, appreciative inquiry. So rather than focusing on talking about weaknesses, which can veer people towards that, all the language here is a bit more positive. So very similar, though, in the idea. So strengths are our strengths in terms of our professional practice. Opportunities would be opportunities for development. So again, rather than thinking about weaknesses, actually, have we got areas that we could develop and improve upon? Aspirations, where do we want to get to? What are our goals? Why are we motivated to reflect and improve? And then results, how would we know if we're moving in the right direction? What would we hope to see and observe? Perhaps what might we, what new data might we look to collect to affirm whether we're moving forwards? So how would we know whether we're making progress? So again, that's quite an interesting question of itself. How do you measure your progress? How do you know whether you are achieving or working towards achieving your goals? And again, having that sort of criteria to work to can help to keep us focused and give us some feedback, I suppose, that we're moving in the right direction. So there we are, SWOT analysis. Just then, so thinking about again your learning journey and how to sort of how to move forward with this. Um, any of these models are perfectly good to use, and they all have their pros. It's really a matter of personal preference, I think, and there are many other reflective practice models and cycles that you can use and draw upon, and we'll be sharing those with you. um, Rolf and Gibbs, and these sort of academics who've developed really quite fantastic reflective models to support reflective practice. And for a lot of people, particularly if you haven't done reflective practice before, having a framework to work to can really help. I think be actually quite necessary to guide that reflection, particularly in the early stages of this. But it should, so reflective practice, whatever model you use, should provide you with the basis for a personal development plan. So it's not something that exists in isolation. It needs to relate to a plan for change. But also, yeah, as part of that planning process, you should think about identifying goals, how to build upon strengths, how you'll overcome your challenges associated with your goals. So what are the barriers, the obstacles which could stop you from achieving your goals? What are they, and how might you overcome them? Any weaknesses or development areas that you've identified that you might need to build up or strengthen in order to achieve your goals. Again, that might well be something that goes into your development plan. So there's no absolute right or wrong way to do this when it comes to structuring a personal development plan, but at its best, it will be supported by good, thorough, evidence-based reflective practice. So, and again, if that data comes from colleagues, people who know you well, or people who have observed your performance, clients, customers, whatever, then it's highly likely that the reflective practice process will be more balanced, and also your development plan will be more accurate. It'll be more targeted, better informed than simply something which you have pulled from your own mind. If you have any questions about this workshop, if you're working through your assignment as part of a qualification route, and you have you'd like anything else on this, templates and that sort of thing, please drop us a line, cmi@prometheanexecutive.co.uk, and we will be certain to help. Thank you very much. I hope you found this workshop helpful, and good luck in your onward journey as a reflective practitioner.